The Carolina frontier of the late 1760s was a land of raw, untamed beauty, where dense forests of pine and oak stretched toward misty mountains and rivers carved silent paths through the wilderness. Here, seasons dictated the rhythm of life. Summers were long and humid, filled with the drone of cicadas and the scent of warm earth, while winters brought a brittle cold that seeped into log cabins. This was the world Andrew Jackson entered in March of 1767, born in a remote settlement along the border between North and South Carolina. His parents, Andrew and Elizabeth Jackson, were Scotch-Irish immigrants who had journeyed across the Atlantic seeking opportunity, only to find themselves on the edge of a contested territory where European settlers, Native American tribes, and the forces of empire clashed in a slow, enduring struggle. The frontier was not merely a place, but a state of being, a constant negotiation between survival and aspiration, where every sunrise promised labor and every shadow held potential danger. Young Andrew, or Andy as he was called, grew up in a modest cabin built by his father's hands, surrounded by the few acres his family managed to clear for planting. Life was structured around essential chores, tending to crops of corn and tobacco, hunting for game to supplement meager meals, and maintaining the fragile defenses against wildlife and weather. From an early age, he absorbed the values of self-reliance and courage, listening to his mother's stories of their Irish heritage and his father's tales of resilience. Education was sporadic, gleaned from a traveling schoolmaster when one was available, but mostly from the Bible and whatever books could be borrowed. Jackson learned to read and write, yet his true classroom was the forest, where he developed a keen eye for tracking and a deep understanding of the land's moods, lessons that would later inform his military strategies. Tragedy first touched Jackson's life when his father died suddenly in 1767, just weeks before Andrew's birth, leaving Elizabeth a widow with 3 young sons to raise in a harsh environment. She became the cornerstone of the family, a woman of stern Presbyterian faith and unwavering determination, who instilled in Andrew a sense of duty and a fiery temper that mirrored her own. Her influence shaped his moral compass, emphasizing honor, loyalty, and a distrust of authority that did not earn its respect. As a boy, Jackson was known for his red hair, freckles, and a propensity for fights, often defending his siblings or challenging older boys, foreshadowing the combative spirit that would define his adulthood. The frontier demanded toughness, and Elizabeth ensured her sons met that demand, even as she nurtured their ambitions for something beyond the backwoods. The American Revolution swept into the Carolina backcountry like a storm, shattering the fragile peace of Jackson's adolescence. By his early teens, he and his brothers joined the local militia, fueled by patriotic fervor and a desire to avenge British injustices. In 1780, at age 13, Jackson served as a courier, riding through dangerous territory to deliver messages, his small stature and knowledge of the terrain making him an effective but vulnerable operative. The war turned personal when his eldest brother, Hugh, died of heatstroke after the Battle of Stono Ferry, and soon after, Andrew and his remaining brother, Robert, were captured by British dragoons during a skirmish. Imprisoned in a camp at Camden, South Carolina, they endured weeks of neglect and disease, where a British officer famously slashed Andrew with a sword for refusing to polish his boots, a scar on his hand and forehead that he carried as a lifelong emblem of defiance. After their release in a prisoner exchange, Jackson and Robert returned home, only to succumb to smallpox that ravaged the prison camp. Robert perished shortly after, and Elizabeth, who had traveled to nurse captured soldiers, contracted cholera and died in 1781, leaving Andrew an orphan at 14. Alone in the world, he wrestled with grief and anger, but also with a newfound independence that hardened his resolve. He inherited a small sum from his grandfather's estate, which he squandered on fine clothing and horse racing in Charleston, a brief, reckless interlude where he tasted the luxuries of city life before poverty forced him to reckon with his future. These losses, however, carved the core of Jackson's identity, a man who viewed life as a battle against odds, who cherished family because he had lost one, and who saw the British as eternal antagonists. By 1784, Jackson resolved to pursue a profession, choosing law as a path to influence and stability. He apprenticed under several attorneys in Salisbury, North Carolina, immersing himself in legal texts by candlelight after days of clerical work. The law on the frontier was a rough-and-tumble affair, often settled with fists as much as arguments, and Jackson thrived in this environment, earning a reputation for thorough preparation and aggressive courtroom demeanor. He was admitted to the bar in 1787, and seeking broader horizons, he journeyed westward across the Appalachian Mountains into what would become Tennessee. This move marked a transition from boyhood to manhood, carrying with him the lessons of the Carolina frontier, a deep-seated resilience, a commitment to democratic ideals forged in revolution, and a shadow of sorrow that fueled his ambitions. The Carolina frontier, with its sun-drenched fields and shadowed woods, remained a vivid memory for Jackson throughout his life. He often reflected on those early years as the forge of his character, where hardship taught him endurance and loss taught him the value of tenacity. The frontier's ethos of individualism and direct justice permeated his political philosophy, leading him to champion the common man against entrenched elites. As he rose to prominence, the echoes of that boyhood, the whisper of wind through pines, the sting of a British sword, the quiet strength of his mother's voice, shaped his vision for America. A nation he believed should be as robust and unyielding as the land that raised him. In this way, the sun and shadow of his youth became inseparable from the legacy he would build, a testament to how landscapes mold destinies. In the spring of 1788, Andrew Jackson arrived in the bustling settlement of Nashville, Tennessee, a raw frontier town perched on the banks of the Cumberland River, where log cabins jostled with nascent stores and the air buzzed with speculation and opportunity. At 21, he carried little more than his law books, a fierce ambition, and the rugged lessons of his Carolina youth, ready to carve a place in this dynamic society. Tennessee was then part of the Western District of North Carolina, a land of dense forests and fertile valleys, increasingly populated by settlers drawn by cheap land and the promise of autonomy. Jackson quickly established a legal practice, riding circuit across rough terrain to represent clients in disputes over land claims, debts, and contracts, cases that often mirrored the volatile nature of frontier justice, where personal honor could escalate into deadly duels. Jackson's legal career flourished due to his relentless work ethic and intuitive understanding of frontier politics. He earned respect for his ability to argue cases with clarity and passion, though his temper sometimes led to confrontations, such as a near duel with fellow lawyer Waitstill Avery, which ended with a handshake after both men fired harmless shots. Beyond the courtroom, Jackson engaged in land speculation, acquiring thousands of acres through purchases and military grants, a common path to wealth in the territory. His ambitions extended to public service. In 1796, he served as a delegate to the Tennessee Constitutional Convention, helping draft the document that ushered Tennessee into statehood. That same year, he was elected as Tennessee's first congressman, then senator, though he found the slow pace of Congress frustrating and preferred the direct action of frontier life. Central to Jackson's personal transformation was his meeting with Rachel Donaldson Robards, the daughter of a prominent Nashville family, who captured his heart with her vivacity and kindness. Rachel was in a troubled marriage to Captain Lewis Robards, marked by jealousy and separation, and when Robards filed for divorce in 1790, Jackson and Rachel, believing the divorce finalized, married in 1791. They later discovered the divorce had not been properly granted until 1793, leading to a remarriage, but fueling whispers of adultery and bigamy that haunted Rachel for decades. Jackson, fiercely protective, cherished Rachel as his anchor, and their partnership was one of deep affection and mutual support, with Rachel managing their home with grace while Jackson pursued his careers in law, military, and politics. Together, they established a home at Poplar Grove, then later at the Hermitage, where Rachel's warmth created a sanctuary from public strife. Though they had no biological children, they adopted a nephew, Andrew Jackson Jr., and became guardians to several Native American and orphaned children, reflecting a complex blend of frontier hospitality and paternalistic duty. Rachel's influence softened Jackson's sharper edges, encouraging his generosity and faith, yet the scandal surrounding their marriage ignited his defensive rage, leading to numerous duels in her defense. Most famously, in 1806, he killed Charles Dickinson in a duel over insults about Rachel, taking a bullet near his heart that he carried for life, a physical testament to his unwavering loyalty. Jackson's military career began on the Tennessee frontier, where he served as a colonel in the state militia, tasked with protecting settlements from Native American raids, often led by factions resisting American expansion. His leadership style was authoritarian yet effective, earning him the nickname Old Hickory for his toughness, as he drilled troops with discipline and shared their hardships in camp. This period honed his strategic thinking, particularly during the Creek War of 1813 to 1814, where his victories, such as the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, showcased his ability to mobilize frontier forces and negotiate complex alliances. These experiences cemented his reputation as a warrior, paving the way for his iconic role in the War of 1812 and shaping his later policies toward indigenous peoples. As Jackson accumulated wealth and status, he became a pillar of Tennessee society, investing in cotton plantations and enslaved labor, which entrenched him in the economic fabric of the South. His legal practice expanded to include prosecuting attorneyships and judgeships, including a seat on the Tennessee Supreme Court, where he issued rulings that emphasized property rights and order. Yet, he remained a man of contradictions, a champion of the common white settler while upholding slavery, a proponent of law who often took justice into his own hands. This duality defined the Tennessee frontier, where ideals of democracy coexisted with harsh realities of conquest, and Jackson embodied its spirit, ambitious, resilient, and ever shaping his destiny. By the early 1800s, Jackson had evolved from a rough-edged lawyer into a formidable figure of authority, his character forged through love, conflict, and the relentless demands of frontier life. His marriage to Rachel provided emotional stability, his legal and military exploits built a foundation of power, and his land holdings secured his fortune. The Tennessee frontier, with its opportunities and perils, served as the crucible where Jackson's identity was refined, preparing him for the national stage. As he looked toward the future, the lessons of this period, the importance of honor, the value of loyalty, and the necessity of force in achieving goals would guide his presidency, leaving an indelible mark on American history. The Hermitage began as a simple log structure in 1804, nestled on 425 acres of fertile land near Nashville, Tennessee, a refuge for Andrew and Rachel Jackson from the tumult of public life. Over decades, it evolved into a grand Greek revival mansion of brick and columned porticos, symbolizing Jackson's rise from frontier lawyer to presidential planter. The estate's name, derived from a place of solitude, belied its bustling activity. It was a working cotton plantation sustained by the labor of enslaved African Americans, whose lives and toil were woven into the very fabric of its fields and walls. Jackson took immense pride in the Hermitage, overseeing its expansions with meticulous attention, from the initial two-story Federal-style home to the elegant mansion rebuilt after a fire in 1834, each brick laid reflecting his aspiration for permanence and legacy. Daily life at the Hermitage followed the rhythms of agrarian seasons, dawn to dusk, with enslaved workers tending to cotton, corn, and livestock under the supervision of overseers. Jackson, though often absent on military or political duties, maintained strict control through correspondence, insisting on efficient operations and detailed accounts. The plantation housed around 150 enslaved people at its peak, living in cabins clustered near the main house, their existence marked by hard labor, family separations, and the constant threat of punishment, yet also by resilience and cultural traditions that persisted amidst adversity. Jackson viewed slavery as an economic necessity and a social order, a perspective rooted in his time and place, and his management blended paternalistic concern with harsh discipline, mirroring the contradictions of his character. Rachel Jackson was the heart of the Hermitage during her lifetime, creating a warm, hospitable environment where visitors, from neighboring farmers to political allies, were welcomed with genuine kindness. She tended gardens of roses and herbs, oversaw domestic chores with the help of enslaved house servants, and provided a calming influence on Jackson's volatile temper. Her sudden death in December 1828, just after Jackson's election to the presidency, devastated him, and he buried her in the garden she loved, later constructing a limestone tomb where he would join her. Thereafter, the Hermitage became a place of memory for Jackson, filled with portraits and mementos of Rachel, her presence haunting the halls as a reminder of love lost and a driving force behind his dedication to the home. Architecturally, the Hermitage showcased Jackson's taste for classical symmetry and durability, with its red brick walls, white columns, and spacious rooms adorned with imported wallpapers and fine furniture. He invested in modern amenities like indoor plumbing and gas lighting, reflecting his interest in innovation, while the grounds included orchards, a racetrack for his prized horses, and a tranquil springhouse. The estate also served as a political hub, where Jackson entertained supporters and crafted policies during his presidency and retirement, its library stocked with books on history and law. Each expansion, from the addition of a rear wing to the landscaping of gardens, was a testament to his vision of creating a lasting monument to his family's name. Beyond the mansion, the Hermitage encompassed a complex web of dependencies, smokehouses, dairy barns, blacksmith shops, and slave quarters, all essential to its self-sufficiency. Jackson took a hands-on approach to farming, experimenting with crop rotations and livestock breeding to improve yields. Though cotton remained the primary cash crop, its cultivation demanding backbreaking labor. Financial pressures often plagued the plantation, especially during economic panics, forcing Jackson to sell lands or borrow money, yet he clung to the Hermitage as his anchor, writing fondly of its tranquil beauty in letters to friends. For him, it represented not just wealth, but a sanctuary where he could retreat from the conflicts of Washington and reflect on his life's journey. In retirement after 1837, Jackson returned to the Hermitage with his adopted son, Andrew Jackson Jr., and his family, seeking solace in routine but remaining engaged in national politics through a steady stream of correspondence. His health declined from chronic tuberculosis, dropsy, and bullet wounds, confining him often to a chair on the porch, where he would watch over the fields and receive visitors. He took pride in mentoring his grandchildren and managing estate affairs, though poor financial decisions by his son led to debt that worried him until his death. The Hermitage, during these twilight years, became a place of reflection, where Jackson recounted stories of battles and presidency to eager listeners, its walls echoing with the weight of history. The Hermitage endures today as a museum and national landmark, preserving the legacy of Andrew Jackson in all its complexity, a home of beauty and brutality, of personal love and systemic oppression. It stands as a physical narrative of Jackson's life, from frontier aspirations to presidential power, and of the enslaved people whose forced labor built its grandeur. For Jackson, it was always more than a plantation. It was a repository of memory, where sunsets over cotton fields recalled Rachel's smile, and every brick held the shadow of his ambitions. In this way, the Hermitage remains a testament to how places become entangled with human stories, shaping and reflecting the eras they inhabit. The years between 1809 and 1812 were a period of relative calm for Andrew Jackson, a lull in the storms of war and politics that would soon define his legacy. Residing at the Hermitage, he immersed himself in the daily rhythms of plantation life, rising at dawn to inspect fields of cotton and corn, often on horseback, his figure a familiar sight to enslaved workers and neighboring farmers. This interlude allowed Jackson to tend to personal matters, managing his growing estate, settling legal disputes as a judge and nurturing his health, which was plagued by dysentery and old dueling wounds that caused him chronic pain. Yet, even in this domestic tranquility, he remained acutely aware of the tensions brewing on the national stage, particularly the escalating conflicts with Britain over trade restrictions and the impressment of American sailors, which threatened to draw the young republic into another war. Jackson's home life was centered around his wife, Rachel, whose gentle presence provided a counterbalance to his fierce temperament. Together, they hosted gatherings for friends and family, where tables groaned with frontier fare, smoked ham, cornbread, and peach pie, and conversations lingered on topics from crop prices to regional politics. Rachel's garden was a particular joy, bursting with flowers and herbs she tended meticulously, and Jackson often joined her there, finding solace in the simple act of planting or pruning. These moments of quiet companionship strengthened their bond, yet the shadow of past scandals about their marriage lingered, fueling Jackson's protective instincts and his disdain for gossip, which he viewed as a coward's weapon. Despite his retreat from active military service, Jackson maintained his role as a major general in the Tennessee militia, drilling troops during periodic musters and advocating for stronger frontier defenses. He corresponded frequently with political allies like John Overton and William Berkeley Lewis, sharing intelligence on Native American movements and British incitements among tribes like the Creek and Shawnee. Jackson believed that war with Britain was inevitable and saw the Western territories as vulnerable, urging preparedness through stockpiled supplies and trained volunteers. His letters from this period reveal a strategic mind already plotting campaigns, envisioning himself at the forefront of conflict, though he couched such ambitions in language of duty and patriotism. Financially, Jackson expanded his holdings during these years, purchasing additional land and enslaved people to increase cotton production, though he faced challenges from fluctuating markets and debts. He took a hands-on approach to plantation management, experimenting with new farming techniques and breeding thoroughbred horses, a passion that led him to build a racetrack at the Hermitage where he hosted local races. These pursuits reflected the frontier elite's blend of agrarian values and competitive spirit, and they provided Jackson an outlet for his energy when political offices seemed distant. Yet, he never fully detached from public life, serving as a trustee for Davidson Academy and involving himself in community disputes, always ready to defend his honor with threats of duels if provoked. Health concerns often interrupted Jackson's routines, with episodes of fever and abdominal pain confining him to bed for days, during which Rachel nursed him with herbal remedies and unwavering devotion. He relied on a regimen of exercise and sparse diet to maintain his strength, but the bullet near his heart from the Dickinson duel caused persistent discomfort, a reminder of the violence that punctuated his life. In quieter moments, he reflected on his mortality and legacy, writing to friends about his hopes for America's expansion and his fears of corruption in government. This introspection, rare for a man of action, hinted at the deeper convictions that would later drive his presidency, such as his distrust of banks and advocacy for westward movement. As rumors of war intensified in 1811 and early 1812, Jackson's correspondence grew more urgent, lobbying Tennessee officials to raise troops and offering his services to President James Madison. He watched with frustration as diplomatic efforts faltered, convinced that only military force could secure American sovereignty. When Congress declared war on Britain in June 1812, Jackson was ready, mobilizing his militia within weeks and preparing to march, though initial delays and bureaucratic hurdles tested his patience. This period of anticipation, the quiet before the storm, forged his resolve, blending the lessons of home with the call to arms and setting the stage for his legendary campaign at New Orleans. Looking back, these years at the Hermitage were a crucible where Jackson's identity as a frontier general coalesced, shaped by the dualities of peace and preparation, love and ambition. The tranquility of plantation life offered him a foundation of stability, while the gathering clouds of war stirred his innate combative spirit. In this balance, he honed the leadership qualities that would define his military successes: decisiveness, resilience, and an unwavering connection to the soldiers he led. As he rode out from the Hermitage toward the battles ahead, he carried with him the echoes of Rachel's prayers and the quiet certainty that his home, and by extension, his nation, was worth defending at any cost. When Andrew Jackson entered the White House in March 1829, he transformed the executive mansion into a vibrant, often chaotic symbol of his populist ideals, opening its doors to ordinary citizens in an unprecedented way. His inauguration drew thousands of well-wishers from across the country, who crowded into the building, tracking mud on fine carpets and standing on furniture to catch a glimpse of their hero, culminating in a raucous celebration where punch bowls were emptied and china was broken, a scene that horrified elites but delighted Jackson, who saw it as the people reclaiming their government. From that day forward, the White House under Jackson became a place of accessible democracy, where farmers, veterans, and office seekers mingled in public receptions, reflecting his belief that the presidency should be directly accountable to the common man. Daily routines in the Jackson White House began early, with the president rising by 6 o'clock, often after a restless night due to chronic health issues, and spending his first hours reading newspapers and correspondence in his study. He maintained a frugal diet, typically plain meats and vegetables, avoiding alcohol except for occasional medicinal wine, and he took daily walks or rides on horseback to manage his pain from old wounds. Jackson's personal staff included trusted slaves from the Hermitage, such as his valet George, who attended to his needs, and a rotating cast of secretaries who handled the overwhelming influx of letters and petitions. Despite his image as a rough frontiersman, Jackson insisted on formal etiquette at state dinners, though he preferred simpler gatherings with close advisors, where policy was debated over tobacco and coffee. The White House itself underwent changes during Jackson's tenure, including repairs to leaky roofs and the installation of new furnishings, though he resisted lavish spending, mindful of public criticism. He added a north portico and improved heating systems, but the most notable addition was the infamous Big Block of Cheese, a 1,400-pound gift from New York dairy farmers in 1835, which sat in the entrance hall for years, symbolizing Jackson's connection to agrarian supporters. Family life centered on his adopted son, Andrew Jackson Jr., and his wife Sarah, who lived with him at times, along with their children, whose laughter echoed through the corridors, providing Jackson a sense of familial comfort amid political strife. Jackson's kitchen cabinet, an informal group of advisors like Martin Van Buren, Amos Kendall, and Francis Preston Blair, often met in the White House library or garden, bypassing the official cabinet, which was fractured by scandals such as the Petticoat Affair. This controversy involved the wives of cabinet members snubbing Peggy Eaton, the wife of Secretary of War John Eaton, over rumors about her past, leading Jackson to vehemently defend her, seeing parallels to the slurs against his late wife Rachel. The affair consumed months of his presidency, ultimately resulting in a cabinet reshuffle and strengthening his reliance on loyal outsiders, who helped craft policies like the fight against the Bank of the United States. Social events at the White House ranged from weekly levees, where anyone decently dressed could shake Jackson's hand, to elaborate balls on New Year's Day and the 4th of July, featuring military bands and refreshments. Jackson, though often fatigued, attended these functions with stoic grace, his tall, gaunt figure commanding respect as he moved through crowds, listening to concerns and offering blunt advice. He particularly enjoyed hosting veterans of the Revolutionary War and War of 1812, sharing stories of battles and ensuring they received pensions, which reinforced his image as a champion of the soldiers. These gatherings were not mere entertainments, but strategic tools for building political networks and gauging public opinion. Health challenges shadowed Jackson's daily life in the White House. He suffered from tuberculosis, dropsy, and recurrent headaches, often coughing up blood or needing to be bled by physicians. He managed his ailments with a regimen of herbal teas, cupping, and sheer willpower, rarely allowing illness to disrupt his schedule. His resilience became legendary, as when he survived an assassination attempt in 1835, confronting the assailant with a cane before aides restrained the man. Through it all, Jackson maintained a rigorous work ethic, reviewing legislation, writing speeches, and overseeing Indian removal policies, which he viewed as necessary for national security, despite their tragic human costs. As his presidency drew to a close, Jackson took pride in what he had accomplished from the People's House, paying off the national debt, vetoing the bank charter, and affirming executive authority. He left the White House in 1837, returning to the Hermitage, but his impact on the institution endured, setting precedents for presidential accessibility and the use of populist rhetoric. The daily life he fostered, a blend of simplicity, tumult, and unwavering conviction, reflected his vision of an America where the government served the many, not the few. In this way, the Jackson White House became more than a residence. It was a stage for the drama of democracy, where every day echoed with the voices of a changing nation. Andrew Jackson's return to the Hermitage in 1837 marked the beginning of a tranquil yet poignant final chapter, where the former president sought solace in the familiar landscapes of his Tennessee home, but remained a towering figure in American politics from afar. Now in his 70s, his health was a constant struggle. Chronic tuberculosis caused racking coughs, dropsy swelled his limbs, and the old bullet wounds ached with every movement, confining him often to a rocking chair on the porch, where he would gaze over the cotton fields with a blanket across his knees. Yet, his mind remained sharp, and he maintained a vigorous correspondence with allies like Martin Van Buren and James K. Polk, offering advice on issues from banking to annexation, his letters penned in a firm, sloping hand that betrayed none of his physical frailty. Life at the Hermitage revolved around family, as Jackson doted on his adopted son, Andrew Jackson Jr., and his grandchildren, who brought youthful energy to the plantation. He took pleasure in simple rituals, reading Bible passages aloud after supper, supervising the children's lessons, and telling stories of his battles and presidency by the fireplace, his voice growing soft with nostalgia. The estate itself required careful management, and though Jackson delegated much to his son, he insisted on reviewing accounts daily, worried by mounting debts from poor cotton prices and young Andrew's financial missteps. This concern for legacy extended to the enslaved community, whom he directed to be treated with humanity, yet he never wavered in his defense of slavery, seeing it as integral to the Southern way of life he cherished. Jackson's political influence endured throughout his retirement. He was consulted on key events like the Panic of 1837 and the rise of the Whig Party, and he campaigned vigorously for Van Buren's re-election in 1840, writing public letters and hosting visitors who sought his endorsement. His home became a pilgrimage site for admirers, from European dignitaries to frontier settlers, all eager to meet the hero of New Orleans, and Jackson, though weary, greeted them with courtesy, often gifting relics like sword fragments or buttons from his uniform. These visits reinforced his status as a living legend, but they also drained his limited energy, leading to periods of seclusion where he reflected on his mortality and the nation's future. The Hermitage grounds offered Jackson a serene backdrop for contemplation. He had Rachel's tomb redesigned with a Greek temple facade, spending hours there in quiet meditation, and he oversaw the planting of rows of trees that would outlive him. He maintained an interest in farming innovations, introducing new crop varieties and improving livestock, and he continued to breed racehorses, a passion that connected him to the vibrant culture of the Tennessee elite. Yet, the shadow of loss lingered. The death of friends like John Overton and the decline of his own body reminded him that time was fleeting, and he often spoke of reuniting with Rachel in heaven, a hope that comforted him in his loneliest moments. As the 1840s progressed, Jackson's health deteriorated further, with episodes of fainting and severe edema requiring constant medical attention from doctors who bled him and administered opiates for pain. He dictated his will in 1843, ensuring the Hermitage would pass to his son and that his slaves would not be sold apart from the plantation, a directive that reflected his contradictory views on human bondage. His final public act was to endorse James K. Polk for president in 1844, a move that helped secure Polk's nomination and victory, demonstrating Jackson's enduring sway over the Democratic Party even from his sickbed. In June 1845, Jackson entered his last days, surrounded by family and servants, his room filled with the scent of medicine and summer blooms from the garden. He whispered final instructions, reaffirmed his faith, and on June 8th, he passed away peacefully, his last words reported to be about meeting Rachel in the afterlife. His funeral was a somber affair, attended by thousands who lined the route to his burial site beside Rachel, where a simple stone marked his grave, a humble end for a man of such tumult. The Hermitage, now quiet, stood as a monument to his life, a place where the long twilight of retirement had blended memory with legacy. Jackson's return to the Hermitage encapsulated the journey of a man who had shaped America's destiny, from frontier orphan to president, and who, in his final years, sought peace in the land he loved. His twilight was not one of idleness, but of continued engagement, where the lessons of a lifetime were distilled into advice and affection for future generations. Today, the Hermitage preserves this era, inviting visitors to walk through rooms where Jackson rocked in his chair, wrote letters, and dreamed of a nation forever expanding, a testament to how even in quietude, great figures cast long shadows over history.